So welcome. My name is Dan Mora. I am CEO, founder of Gemini Legal. We are here with Eric Farber, who's a up and coming successful attorney in our niche. He has a track record, and we're really actually excited to talk to him. He wrote a book for our fellow attorneys about what culture means in a law firm. First, I want to thank you, Eric. It's been really cool to work with you, work with your team, and actually reading your book. It just really highlighted the team aspect and how it's just critical. It has to happen. Culture. I really the first thing I want to ask you is kind of the one thing that percolated for me is why you wrote the book and like who you're. I get that your audience is attorneys, but I feel like you're writing this book too for your staff. Am I onto something there?
Oh no, I don't think so. I mean, it definitely. I don't know how many of our staff actually read it, right? But it definitely was sort of written. We had this, we have had this incredible success. I think at the end of the day, without trying to sound sort of egotistical with regards to it, I mean, I think I wrote it from me. It's interesting. We were talking just before we jumped on here about the fact that it's hard to make changes when the ship gets bigger and bigger, and you sort of, you put in ideas and you got to let them percolate. And so, when we started this, I was still doing my old practice, which took a considerable amount of time. It was representing athletes, entertainers still. And then I cut that out, and I realized I needed something else to do, right? Because I couldn't be in it all day, every day. I'd drive people crazy. And so I actually took a job, a side gig, teaching entrepreneurship at a film school down in LA. And I was on the board of the entrepreneurship program and helped set that up. And it was something that took, at least half my time. I got done with that, and it was sort of like, I try to do things that keeps me away from bothering people in the office, so to speak. So I think, I was really taking a lot of notes. I was really trying to journal things that were happening all the time. And then I was asked by Michael Mogul, who is a crisp video, who does videos for law firms, to speak at a conference that he had. And then afterwards he said, "Hey, have you thought about writing a book?" And he hooked me up with their publisher.
Nice, so, real nice.
So who's it for? Well, in part to me, to keep me away from being too involved. Right? Yeah.
Yes, I jokingly say that in my company, it's my job to make the problems, and then everybody's job to clean it up.
Right. Yeah.
The entrepreneurial
curse. Yep. We can sometimes we can do that to our people, and the best people are the ones who tell you to leave their office. Yeah.
Very cool. So yeah, I didn't do a great job of introducing the book. I know you don't want to be self-promoting, but can you tell me kind of the success and what feedback you've gotten so far?
Yeah, we've gotten some really good feedback here. I'll be self-aggrandizing. Here's the book, The Case for Culture, and it's done pretty well. It actually jumped up to #1 in the legal on Amazon. So it hit the #1 bestseller on Amazon, and was making its way up in the entrepreneurship category as well. And I was pretty proud of that because, it's away from there. It focuses on the fact that, I saw that law firms, and one of the reasons I wrote it was that law firms do not focus on culture as a strategy. And we, as our company grew larger and larger, it became more apparent to me that we needed to put in better business strategies.
Gotcha.
So, yeah, and that's and so the book itself, it's done pretty well, and done a lot of podcasts, a lot of interviews. I was actually going to go I was keynote speaker at several things that have all gone online. I'm the international keynote at the Culture Conference in Australia for their culture and tourism, I think, coming up in actually later on this month. And so that's all online now. Unfortunately, don't get to fly to Australia. So, but, yeah, so it's been a nice little ride.
Nice. And culture as a topic, I love it. The terms engagement seems to be the newest hot term for employee relations engagement. And I theorize too that culture is really the key. It's another term for, well, it's the way to achieve engagement with employees. And I look at, and it's kind of fun as an entrepreneur and as a business owner that you get to experiment with these theories and these thoughts. So how long has your firm been open now? I know you transitioned from other types of law into work comp, California work comp, consumer workers compensation. But how long since you started the business, and give us some aha moments, I'm curious, that brought you to comp and then even to this, the culture as being a focus?
Well, I think comp found me a little bit. I've been in practice since '94, essentially, a little bit out of it. I worked in Hollywood for a while, one of the big talent agencies. I worked at Sony Pictures, helping to produce movies. And that was quite some time ago. But I really represented athletes and entertainers for the majority of my career. Did a lot of federal court work, and all around the country. I had all sorts of really crazy clients, from casino owners in Costa Rica to production companies in London. And so it was a world that I traveled an enormous amount. I traveled more than 200 days a year, and those were sort of airport days, so you add those in. I had a really bad back, which I still battle on occasion, as you know. And so I was actually in Buffalo, New York, on a mediation for an NFL player client goes back about 10 years or so, and ruptured a disc in my back and ended up in emergency surgery. And I was actually in a rehab center for about 2.5 weeks before I could fly. I flew back to Phoenix, where I grew up, where my mother lives, and stayed there for another 3 weeks because I couldn't get a direct flight from Buffalo, New York to San Francisco. And so I stayed there until I was strong enough to actually make it back. And all sorts of things, that was my aha moment, was I needed a different type of practice, one that really I got to run rather than one was going to run me. And I really started digging in and studying lots of things about business, et cetera. I had all these athlete clients. I'd represented more than 200 people, as mainly football players, but all sports. Somebody came to me and said, "Hey, interested in taking on some of these workers' comp cases for the athletes?" And so I thought about it. It was an opportunity, and it was really during the Great Recession when it happened, and it was an opportunity for me to continue in a practice that I could start seeing more as a business, because I really didn't have a whole lot of experience in it. I had been tangentially involved in it because when our player clients would retire, they would do a case. Mm-hmm. And so anyway, and I really saw that there was an opportunity there to build. And so we still do a few of the athlete clients, but we mainly focus on the general worker at this point. So that's how it all came about. But in my old days, I represented some really interesting entities and people. I was one of the lawyers for the Tupac Shakur estate for 18 years, and did a lot of really interesting stuff in the First Amendment and trademark, copyright, a lot of litigation. It was fun stuff. At the end of the day, you were still being a lawyer, right? But I will say, of all the stuff that I've done, I enjoy this more, and I can guarantee that if I were still doing that stuff now, it would be a whole lot different. I've basically been running the practice from home since March. Most of the people have been home, right? Would be a totally different world.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's super common. And I think your book is right on to draw that line between business owner and lawyer.
Yeah.
That's a heavy push and pull. And I see a lot of people struggle with that.
Yeah. It is a push and pull. I mean, that's the whole thing, right? Like, we're either, owners are either artists, entrepreneurs, or managers, right? It's kind of like those are the three things. And I always say you get to be two of those, but you can't be three. You can't be all three, right? And the entrepreneur is sort of that person who sort of sets up and sets the ball rolling and gets a little bit of a vision, et cetera. And the artist is really that person who knows how to do the work at a high level. Mm-hmm. So I'm not that person anymore, right? I wanted to, it was either going to do that. And I think for any lawyer who's sort of got a firm, they need to make that choice. If they want to be a great trial lawyer, don't be doing the bookkeeping, right? And so you got to be sort of one. And when it sort of flourishes and you can grow and you can have more people in place that are very specific to doing the roles that they're hired for, then you really do sort of get to choose, right? Then you get to choose which one are you going to be. And I'm not necessarily a great manager, right? I think I'm a better leader, right? Trying to encourage people and engage people. You talked about engagement a little bit, right? So, but a lot of people, if you're solo, you're going to be all three of those things, right? And as you grow, you really have to build the talent around you that you're not good at. Hire people that are better than you.
Yeah. And lawyers, they have maybe a bad reputation. And is there something that prevents lawyers just in general from kind of being able to separate those out and then delegate?
I think everybody's different, right? And those are all learned skills. Mm-hmm. And they're very much learned skills, to be able to do that. In our business, I think we have more opportunity to delegate out than in others.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Plus, just having that realization that there are competencies that usually don't lend themselves to everybody's personality. I find that to usually have people either fall into I like those categories that you made. Management or leadership is usually where I draw the line. Leadership, yeah. The vision, guiding, management, setting things up, making sure things run right.
Yeah. There's a big difference between leadership and management, and I think a lot of people don't really understand that. Leadership and management are two completely separate roles.
Yeah, very different.
And it's very rare to have somebody who's good at both.
Right.
Yeah. But individual managers, you better teach them, how to be leaders, because if they're managing people, you always have to have a good leadership, quality, right?
Yeah, people skills. You have to like people.
People have to like you.
Yeah.
Why I try to stay out, right? I put the more likable people up front. Yeah.
You had a really funny story in your book. You didn't talk about it too deep, but you were at a firm and you got called the Jewish N-word. That's kind of a little bit funny, probably a little serious, but that seemed like an aha moment for you when it came to culture.
Yeah, I mean, we were a much smaller firm at that point, and it was somebody who had left. I was sort of going through the notes of different things, making sure, that I was caught up, and it's funny how people don't really recognize the fact that most of the stuff in their offices are recorded, especially because we're law firms, right? We have to track this stuff, and I saw that, and it wasn't funny. It certainly wasn't funny at the time, right? I still don't think it's funny. I mean, I think there's, incredible divide. I grew up in Canada where and we moved when I was in my early teens to Phoenix. It was a big shock about, how race is dealt with in the U.S. I, you know, and especially I was just surprised by the whole thing. But essentially, for people who are listening, and the book actually starts out with this, it was that somebody who worked for me had, talking to another employee, said, "Is there an N-word for Jews?" talking about me. And I looked at that and I really was like, what did I do? I've actually thought I had a decent relationship with this person. Like, so the fact that, they're sort of leaving your office with a smile on their face and flipping you off as they walk out, is really hard to take as a business owner, right? And, there's a few truths to running a business, and, you're trying to get to facts, right? You're trying to really get to facts, and sort of like there's what you think is going on, what your employees tell you what's going on, and then what's actually going on, right? There's interpretation of the facts, but there are facts out there. We're living in a world of alternative facts these days, right? So, but there are facts that are going on, and you're just trying to get to the bottom of them, so to speak, right? So.
Yeah. I find it interesting. You and I have read a lot of the same books, and after reading your book, I'm like, oh, okay. Now I see why we get along pretty good. But a lot of the Stoicism learning that you've done and I've done as well, it really teaches you that very simple logic. That simple logic is truth, and we muddy it. We muddy the waters when we insert the emotional aspect and the not necessarily rational things. And what I found is there's an incredible advantage to being in the business world, in that that logic is very welcomed and is necessary, simply because it is the source of truth.
Yeah.
And as a business owner, wading through that to get to the truth, you made a good example and a good point, that sometimes you don't understand what's going on in the minds of your employees. You make a lot of really good suggestions for the audience reading the book about how you can engage employees in a healthy way that is very productive. And obviously you've had success with that. But what are some of those ways that you connect with your employees?
Well, I think, this podcast is very interesting because it's closer to my competition than any other podcast I've done, right? So there's actually a chance they may listen to this. We engage people by listening to them.
Sure.
That's first and foremost. The other stuff is just a bunch of ideas, right? Like maybe they work, maybe they don't. Probably half the stuff in the book aren't even stuff that we still do. But how to engage with them? We try to understand people like any good business should. I don't think I'm going to tell anybody that they don't already know. Tell anything that they don't already know. I agree on the Stoic piece of this. Running a business, you're going to get, especially in the early days, it's chaos, right? It's you're managing a toddler, you're managing a newborn baby, and then it gets into this stage where it's just chaos, right? The terrible twos, and so how you react to things, which is sort of the top level Marcus Aurelius level of Stoicism, which is everything is in how you react, right? And this is a quote that is used all over the place. The Alcoholics Anonymous gives it. It's as their serenity prayer. It's all over. It's Viktor Frankl uses it. He has a version of the quote as well, who wrote Man's Search for Meaning, one of the most popular books in world history. it is about the fact that, we can't control the things that happen to us. We can only control our reaction. So, and that's at the core of all of it, right? Because in those early days, you're going to get kicked in the teeth 100 times a day, and then in the stomach 3 times, and then there's an uppercut that's coming right about 5:30 before you're going to go home. And if you realize that it's okay, there's very few things that are going to sort of put you out of business, so to speak, then you're going to be all right. And even if those things are going to put you out of business, that's okay. Especially for lawyers, you got a skill, right? So it's funny. I remember talking to one of our people a long time ago, and we were in the parking lot, and they were fairly new to their position, and they were like, they're very nervous. Well, what if this happens? What if that happens? What if this happens? And I say, well, it would be exactly the same as when that happened with these people's names on it. A year ago. Do you remember that? Oh yeah. And when that second thing happened with these people's names on it, right? And do you remember that? And I say, we've been through it all before. There's very few things that you haven't already been through, right? So, I look at it as the number one thing for a business owner is resilience, right? Understanding that you can approach these things calmly with a calm head, and you're going to get through it. So there are things that are going to be very tough. I've got a very close friend who owns a chain of gyms in LA. He had just completed buying another building, expanding, doing another club, taking out a monstrous loan to do all of this stuff, and then boom. And so it wasn't like he was sitting on a pile of money. He had just risked his whole life savings. That's a tough one. But you know what? I talked to him. He's still working out every day. He's still figuring out a way to do it. He says, if it all goes bad, I'll file for bankruptcy and go to the family farm in Oklahoma, right? And I'll live with I'll set up shop and take my family into the back, into the garage there. I mean, there's always, what do we really need? What do we really need? So, as long as we can think clearly, that's going to help us through.
Yeah. And I think, this is quite a wake up call for a lot of businesses. And I know, most business owners, a lot of business owners I run into, they don't maybe focus on the details. They kind of set it and forget it is a great way to think about when I've fallen into that trap so many times. And it brings to mind, you bring up Good to Great by Jim Collins several times in your book,
Sure.
which has been a bellwether book for me as well. Specifically bring up the chapter on the culture of discipline.
Yeah.
Which I'm also a huge fan of that. It's one of my favorite chapters in the book. And so tell me, how do you guide your people to see the value of discipline? I mean, discipline itself has a negative connotation unless you are disciplined or you value discipline. But I have had, for example, several instances where I've had to help people understand what the value of discipline. And I'm curious what your experience is within your firm.
Well, look, discipline is not being a disciplinarian. It's simply being disciplined. It's being disciplined in making choices, in arriving at conclusions, and executing them. That's it. In doing things the same way and having processes for things. It's not that tough.
Yeah, I was gonna bring that up because process to me is integral to discipline. Tell us.
Well, so now you're getting into the stuff that I'm on NDAs with my own company. So, yeah, but all businesses need to have a good process for everything. Yeah. I'll leave it at that.
So the advantages of having process, at least for Gemini, has been you give your specialists, your line workers, you give them what it is that they need to accomplish. There's no guesswork. In addition, what ends up happening, what's really important about process is that it allows your team to be doing the same thing at the same time. So you can identify a problem faster, and your clients, the most important aspect of it is that your clients get a consistent product.
Yep. Yep. That's it. I mean, that's, at the end of the day. And so, and some of this stuff, it just takes a really long time to put in place and get people in the mood, in the rhythm for these things. And we give them tools. We got a lot of, we got speakers who come in. We've got all sorts of different stuff that we do for them, right, to help us and even help us, systemize what we can. Yeah. So, yeah. Right.
Another thing that you bring up.
By the way, sorry, I'm going to stop you. So I know you're a big fan of Stoic, writings and stuff. So this just came yesterday, which is Ryan Holiday's new book called Lives of the Stoics, and I'm already about a third of the way through it. It's so it's very good if you haven't read it. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm into Stillness is the Key right now, which is one that you've also recommended.
Oh wow. Okay. Well, this is the follow-up. It just was released yesterday.
Nice.
Yeah.
Yeah, and on that topic, because I think that we can get sucked into the cyber sphere and social media and the franticness of our business too can really affect us. And you talk a bit about this, and you alluded to it earlier about how you had to change your lifestyle and slow down. The benefits of that, I think, are just enormous. I think it would surprise people to know that successful people, they're not, well, successful people in all areas of life, I'm going to say, have balance. They're not working 60, 80, 90 hours a week.
No. I certainly don't anymore. There are times when it's required, right? There are times when it's required, but most of it's been, and then it gets to the point where you're sort of in a habit. But no, I prior to the pandemic, I went to the gym, for, an hour and a half every day, if not more. I took a lot of time off. I'll work from a different place just to get a different view. I always want to see greenery. I'm sitting at home. As I said, before, I don't know that I'll go back to an office. I'm okay with this. Team's pretty good. Balance is an enormous thing. And when your job requires as much out of you as running a company or scanning stuff, I mean, I'm no different than the people, who are in a mailroom still. They have one job to do with the company. I just have a different one. And I don't need a whole lot of stuff. I'm not one of these in the huge house and all that kind of stuff. I mean, I kind of joke with people. We just replaced, last year we just replaced our couch that was 22 years old. And at the beginning of the pandemic, I was home. So it was great because, I called the handyman over and I was like, oh yeah, and there's this thing and there's that thing. And I realized, that I'd been staring at a mirror that I tried to put on the wall when I moved into the house 14 years ago. Might have been, just over 14 years. Actually, I'm sorry, it's 16 years ago. And realized, my God, it's still just sitting next to the wall. And so we had him install it. I'm very excited about this, right? It's only been sitting there for 16 years. It's one of those things is, what is the end goal of all of this? Is it to buy a big house? Because that's not going to be the driver, right? It's not going to be the driver of it. And that's why I say sort of workers' comp kind of found me. I'm really into it. I'm really into the helping people. And you can't fake that stuff because there's too much to do, right?
That the advantages of the study and the practice that you've put into Stoicism and you know mental IQ, emotional intelligence. Those things are, I mean, there's probably been some amazing results that you've seen personally. But what I think is really great and important is that you care about your employees, you care about your clients to the point where you're promoting these things to them. And you use a lot of examples in your book about that humanity, number one, but just uh, the common courtesy when it comes to having employees and giving them extra room and extra time off, whatever it takes. Um, you know, I'm curious. You know, that those are the best rewards that we got, right? As employers. Um,
Absolutely.
but
I
you
mean,
had,
it's interesting, like one of our people, just bought a house. Um, they closed on it. They moved in, the last couple of weeks. Like that's really special to me, right? They started out, as an assistant. They worked their way up. They got into the management side. They've really blossomed. They actually came to us from somebody else's firm, that from another work comp firm, and they've done really well. And um, and that's the stuff that's really, it's pretty cool, right? Like that's a company that is being able to take care of its people.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
that's fun stuff.
yeah,
Fun stuff. So, tell me about Costa Rica, Eric. That's part of your mental break. It's
yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's a getaway. And it can be whatever. It's just changing your view,
Mhm.
right? If I'm going to stare at a computer, it doesn't matter if the computer's sitting here or the computer's sitting in Costa Rica. This is a very interconnected world these days. It's pretty nice to get away from the stuff that's going on here. I mean, we're certainly seeing things that are going on in the U.S. that we've never seen before. I think it's going to get worse,
Mhm.
unfortunately. Um, I'm okay with living in the bubble of sort of Northern California. I feel a little bit exempt from the hyper partisanship that is going on because but it's Costa Rica for me is just that is the idea of you got to get away, and for everybody, right? And
Well, it's
so
that deep work. It's the deep work. It's
yeah,
uh, the distractions of everyday life. Yeah, it's absolutely necessary.
yeah,
For
yeah. I mean, and it's for everybody, right? My wife takes the dog on a walk every day at about 5:30, right? Because we live right by, great green space, tons of hikes and everything else. I work out in the morning. I play golf. For me, it's not just the act of playing golf; it's the act of seeing all this greenery around me in nature, multiple times a week, right? That's a big thing. It's funny. I golf with a guy who owns a business in San Francisco, and it's a little Asian restaurant named Barcadero. He golfs every morning at 7 o'clock every single day of the year, except for Mondays because the course is closed, and and then on the weekends he does it twice a day.
sure.
Right? And it's just the idea of being out there.
That's his routine. That's his area
Yeah,
for
everybody's got to have one.
clearing out the cobwebs. And yeah,
Yep.
yeah. You
Yeah.
mentioned a couple other techniques, which meditation and all with the same purpose. We tend to lose focus on what's important when we're so consumed by the day to day.
Yeah.
And I too recommend that as much as possible for my employees.
Yeah. Look, I say, um, find your superpower and find your kryptonite.
Mhm.
And so, what's your superpower and what's your kryptonite? And for me, it's sort of the same, right? It's on both sides. My superpower is being calm. My kryptonite is being uncalm.
Yes, you know what? That's also look at strengths and weaknesses as a double-edged sword. Every strength taken to the extreme is bad.
Right. Right. So so it's double-sided, right? So I know that if it gets out of control, and that's why I try to live by the motto of, control your reaction to things. And there's numerous things, and it's not just Stoicism. I mean, it's Stoic philosophy, right?
Mhm.
So it's the same with Buddhism. It's a philosophy, right? And a philosophy might be on paper, but it really is more about, it's a guide for trying to live your life, right? And so at the end of the day, most of them find their same way in, at least on the good side. I'm sure there's Machiavellian philosophies that people like to live by. We're seeing that all the time these days, where there's a philosophy and a sort of cult of money and greed and power and fame in our broader culture right now. And one of the things I like about running a company that has a strong internal culture of values and mission and drive and principles is that it's a solace from the outside world.
Yeah, that's so true. Yeah, people spend a lot of time at work, and it's it's our jobs to create that environment that's going to be healthy and allow them to grow and thrive. I think
Yeah.
it's our obligation, it's our duty.
Yeah, I mean, take somebody who basically, grew up, went to school, did they may have gone to a certain type of school that has a level of principles and has a level of values and then they're sort of thrust out into the broad working world, and there's sort of not much there, right? And so, it gives them a place where they can sort of call home and say, this is the place, these are the way we do things here. This is the way we think about things here.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things about law school, and one of the great things about law school, is it teaches you how to think in a different way. And all good disciplinary programs do that, right? They call them disciplines for a reason, right? So we go to law as a discipline, and so, or meds as a discipline, et cetera. Or a business school discipline. And I know you were a B school guy, right?
No, I'm a dropout.
Oh, I thought you were for some reason I thought you were a B school guy, but it's what gives, these places, and one of the things that makes them better places is how they approach that, right?
Yeah. No, I align with that. My experience was military right out of high school, and absolutely, you're deep into values, you're deep into mission. That's super critical. I know you're a Jocko fan as well.
Link, yeah, I am a fan of Jocko, yeah.
Yeah, so Extreme Ownership was an amazing book, one of the key books I've read
Yeah.
in recent years. But really that extreme ownership. But you're focused on the vision. That's the team. That's the team's job, is focused on the mission and the vision, right?
Yeah. And I think it's interesting because I actually have a friend who runs a very large practice in Nebraska, and it keeps growing and growing. And he's an ex-military guy, and they actually do veterans work for veterans, national practice, named John Barry. And I actually mentioned him in the book as well. He really approaches things from a very military, a military style culture.
Mm-hmm.
And I find it very interesting because what people don't realize is in military cultures that leaders are last, right? That their job as the leaders is to help those below them.
Right.
That's it. Right.
Definitely.
Yeah. And you're not going to get an infantry person to walk into a minefield on behalf of simply the flag. They're doing it on behalf of their leaders because they've been asked to.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Yep, exactly. Yeah.
So.
That's fun. That's
Yeah.
fun. So before we leave, I'm just curious, when you think about your values, your company values, which one stands out most? Maybe that this was the one that stuck the fastest, has the most fire under it for your employees. But which of your values would you say is the most important?
Oh, I'm not sure that there's any one that is more important than others. I value team and community. I value empathy. a lot, and I've read books, um, uh, several books just on empathy itself. Um, and there's a lot of talk about it these days. I highly recommend Brene Brown's work on it is really great. And I think of those things, right? That I'm going to look at it and say there are competing factors in everything that we do, and which are the ones that are going to win out. And by having a set of principles that we can sort of go back to and literally read them and say, oh, should we do this or should we do that? And by reading them and saying, these are our guiding principles and this is what feels right. And sometimes we're talking about very, razor thin sort of choices that both feel right and ethical. And we sort of choose one based on our initial sets of principles and values.
Makes great sense. The empathy would be the focus. That's where the needs are. That's where we
Yeah.
meet. That's where we meet the people
Yeah.
that we need, and they need us, and vice versa. That's how community works, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So, this country could use quite a bit more of it right now.
Yeah, for real, for real.
Yeah.
Eric Farber, thank you so much for your insight on culture and law firms, and thank you for just being a beacon of empathy, and we really appreciate your time being on our podcast here.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.